I think I'm ready now. Yeah.
Speaking of majors, I have a humanities major at the moment. I was wondering if you think you seem to talk about philosophy and humanities as if they're the same, two sides of the same thing. I feel very interested in humanities, but I'm also interested in philosophy. I was wondering if you have to be interested in both.
Hello. How your parents feel about your ring? Your parents?
They're okay with it.
You sure?
Yeah.
I mean, did they have to adjust? Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably.
Tell them I say hi.
Well,
Tell them I understand them. Can you? Well, here. Oh, no. Yeah. No, you're good. Okay. So let's look at your question in a slightly different way, within a different context, if that's okay. Imagine for a moment that you're Persian, and you are a little. And imagine for a moment that I am not Persian, and I am. Hello. And imagine for a moment, Anna, why are you laughing? And imagine for a moment that I grow to like you. So I don't know why I like you, I just know I like you. Okay. And so let's say begin to like your physical body, your face and body language and all that. As I become more interested, I realize that inside your body lives a history. And that history has to do a little bit about your family. So I wasn't interested in your family, but I'm interested in you. But all of a sudden, my interest in you grows a bit wider, and its range gets a bit bigger. And now I begin to ask you about your parents. I don't really care for them, but because I like you, I like to get to know them as well. And then I realize that you come from this culture that I don't know much about. So I ask you about, what's Iran like? What's the Persian like? The Persian culture like? Do you guys have poetry? Do you guys have art? And then you introduce me to Rumi, for example. And I only just liked you at the beginning, but all of a sudden you're taking me to places I never imagined myself going. And I become really fascinated with you, and then your parents, and then your culture, and then your history. And at some point I say, how about you and I go to Iran and live there for a few years? And all of a sudden, I no longer want to stay here. I want to get on the plane and just go far away to a land I've never been, people I've never seen, a culture I've never really been exposed to. If my interest in you was only limited in your physical body, the truth is, I would soon lose interest. It doesn't have much of a shelf life. But as I realize there are all these different branches that come out of you, and all these branches have a good richness to them, I find myself really interested. And you become the hub, and all these different branches are connected to you. And in essence, When I begin to learn the Persian language, what I really want to do is speak to you in Persian. When I become interested in the artwork of Farshchian, which is philosophical, religious, spiritual to some extent, then when you and I sit, we talk about that particular kind of branch. You may be very much interested in, say, existentialism, let's say. And let's say you're really interested in a guy named Franz Fanon, let's just say. Is this black Frenchman, had lots of difficulties, died around the age, I think, 36, cancer. And let's say you gravitate towards his philosophy, then you realize that he was part French, part Algerian. All of a sudden you become interested in those cultures. And then you realize that the French colonized Algeria. All of a sudden you become interested in social and political philosophy. Why are people so mean and so power hungry, are willing to express so much violence, on each other? And before you know it, you're sitting with Angela Davis, one of the founders of Black Panthers, and you're having a chit-chat, a serious conversation about justice and all these different movements. But that's not how you began. None of us really know where our interest takes us. Certainly I was never interested in teaching philosophy, or I was never interested in teaching in the classroom, because I've always known myself to be shy and reserved, which I am to this day. I started just liking a man, but not going to school to get degrees, and certainly not talk about these ideas and not to be in the classroom, but things unfold in some magical, ridiculous, mysterious ways. So it may be true that you're interested in just humanities. Maybe you like the dancing part, just the arts. But you realize that any artwork is the product of its time. Picasso is the product of the Nazi movement. Michelangelo is the product of religion, And all of a sudden you realize all you really wanted to do was just study the craft of Picasso, but all of a sudden you're interested in war. All of a sudden you're interested in fascism, how they come about, how they influence people. Now, it also depends on the depth of your interest in regards to humanities. Maybe I just have no interest in anything other than your physical body. Maybe that's just it. And maybe we can use your history as a gossip, or maybe we can talk about your culture as gossip, but I'm never going to be interested. So it's okay, you're good. The other part is that just in case you're a feeler type, the idea of sitting somewhere and reading a book that is more intellectual, it's not very appealing. So what's going to happen to you is you're going to be, at a certain point, able to look at literature as a piece of work, like painting. But you're not so much about doing mental gymnastics with what you read. What you're going to do is you're going to pick and choose the paragraphs, you're going to pick and choose the authors, you're going to pick and choose literature. You're going to approach reading very much the way you approach art, which is it has to be filtered through your feelings, not through the intellect. Now, it may be that you've come across some people who just think too much and talk too much about gibberish, one of them being me. And as they begin to talk about philosophy, you realize that it appeals, more to your intellect than to your heart. And that's not something you want to do. It's not something that interests you. Eventually it will. but not at this stage. Because when you're young and when you want to kind of pursue something, it really has to go through the feeling filters. You don't want to think too much about anything because that's not what young people do. Young people want to feel themselves alive. It is true that some young folks gravitate more towards the intellectual aspect of life, but for the most part, you want to feel your own existence. After a certain point, if we ever get there, you come to a place where you say, you know what, it's good to feel, but I also want to understand. And it's not something you started with, but it's certainly something you'll eventually be interested in. It's like any relationship. You walk into it with a good amount of feelings. I like your eyes. I like the way you make me feel. Then you begin to be roommates. And then you realize that, there's a lot of politics involved. And if you want to keep this relationship going and keep it healthy, you need to understand a few things about yourself, about your boundaries, about your companion, about his boundaries or his or hers. And the problem with the thinker type is that, for someone who feels like you, is that you find yourself enslaved under an avalanche of responsibilities and obligations you don't really want to have, you don't really care for. You like the guy. You just don't like all the intellectual lines that he or she creates, And so you rebel against it. So, the thing is, if you want to, let's just say you go to San Francisco and you take a classical humanities. And classical humanities is something that you begin to study from the Stone Age era, the Paleolithic tradition, all the way to just before the Renaissance, And so you have a lot of history, you have a lot of archaeology. Look, how are you? How are your parents? Are they excited? As they should be. Thank you for your note. Very kind. And you realize that when you begin to teach or read classical humanities books, it's mostly about religious ideas, because that's how human beings were governed for at least, for many thousands of years. Okay. Then comes the Renaissance, and then comes the Age of Reason, around the late 17th, 18th century. And what's going to happen now, you're not going to be interested in religion anymore, because that's out the window. Now all you want to do is just think about life very, very closely and intimately. It's all about thinking. And then you get to a place of romanticism, and that's like modern humanities, just before World War II. So the point I'm trying to make is, if you look at human history for a long time, you realize it's mostly about feeling. Then there comes a point where humanity at large grows tired of just, being, and then they get to, and then this and then that, all of a sudden, Laney College. Does that? You're not interested in humanities. All of us have certain feelings about the things we like. We don't really know what they are. All I know is that I just don't like to read Immanuel Kant. I don't know why, I just don't like it. And I don't like to read most of what Plato had written. And I don't like most of what Kierkegaard writes. I don't know what I'm looking for, but I seem to have this antenna. All of a sudden, it kind of goes up, says, yes, this paragraph, focus on it. It has no direction. All I know is that there are many things under the sun I just don't like. I know what I do like, I just don't know where to go to find them. So you keep shopping for things. And if you're lucky, there's a spark. You don't know how it happens, you don't know why it happens, but you pursue it because it makes you feel alive. And then if that happens, my recommendation would be just exploit the hell out of it. If there's a Chinese restaurant you like, before a recession hits and the shop closes, go there every day, because I don't know who the cook is, but the food is delicious. If you find an instructor and you gravitate towards this particular person, spend as much time as you can, because what they do is they create habits. And so your dim interest becomes a bit stronger, and it becomes more of a guidance, more of a GPS. And before you know it, you realize that this is what you want to do for the rest of your life. And as you gain more autonomy, you realize that your vision just expands, The truth is, if you enjoy Picasso, you have to be interested in justice. You have to be interested in fascism. You have to be interested in human cruelty, because they're related. You also have to be interested in sex, because Picasso stopped around. And all of a sudden you realize all you really wanted to do was focus on Guernica, but now you're taking human sexuality, and that's how it happens. But when you're young, you say, this is the only thing I want to focus on, and no more. But if you exercise some patience, and if you have the right people around you, all of a sudden you realize you become like a Costco. Human beings have no choice but to think, because life is tough. It doesn't matter what branch in life you fall into. Life is just difficult, and so by default you have no choice but to think. You have around 100 billion brain cells or neurons that are devoted to simply thinking. Okay. Now, life burdens all of us, and we express ourselves in all sorts of different ways. Sometimes you express yourself by crying. Sometimes you express yourself by writing poetry. Sometimes you express yourself by taking shelter under the writings of Khalil Gibran or Soren Kierkegaard. Sometimes you take shelter under Duchamp. So we are just meaning-seeking, refuge-seeking sort of animals. You have to express yourself somehow. And if you don't really know why you're feeling the way you're feeling, you find someone who matches those feelings, and you just, they become your oasis for a while. So, I guess, long story short, humanities is great. You have to take other classes like math and stats, and astronomy and physics and those things. Then when you get to your master's program, it's a bit more focused. You only take humanities classes. If you like, you can take some philosophy classes. And it doesn't take very much for you to change course. All it requires is someone to inspire you. And once that inspiration hits, all of a sudden you realize that, oh, maybe you're just interested in doing physics. That's how it happens. So, give yourself some room. There has to be something about people who are a little older than 18, where they drop out of school and they come back to school. Something about them is not right, in a good way. That, you're done with high school, you say, man, high school sucked. And you assume that college has something really wonderful to offer you. You realize that these are just like high school teachers occupying college classrooms or four-year school classrooms, because they're all the same. The way you are is not going to change because you have a PhD or just because you're teaching at Yale or Stanford or Laney College. They're all the same. People don't change that much. And you take a few college classes only to realize, well, things are really no different than high school. You drop out. And you drop out because you're a feeler. You want something, but you can't find it anywhere. So you go away for a number of years. You realize, well, life doesn't have much to offer you either. So you go back to school. You come back to school a bit more insightful, a bit more mature, a bit more ripened in the way you think and feel about things. And you have a bit more patience and tolerance for ridiculous people like me. you know, where they come to class and ramble on for like 5-6 hours. Your salvation is hopefully if you continue to be interested in any field in education. You get to a master's program, you can be a bit more focused. When you get to the PhD, you can really, really be focused, you know. But the trick is whether you go to Stanford or any other school, find an instructor that to whom you can relate, you know, because that's your umbilical cord. Take as many classes with this person as you possibly can, because everyone has a shelf life. Everyone, it doesn't matter who it is, Jesus Christ, you know, Socrates, anyone, doesn't really matter. Since all relationships will have an expiration date, while that window is open, you know, climb through it, exploit, you know, whatever lives inside that room, get your degrees quickly if you want to teach or whatever it is you want to do. Once you walk into it, you're going to be new in the power that's given to you through education. You're going to be inspired, excited. That is also short-lived. Maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years. Maybe you'll come to realize you suck. Being in the classroom, no one knows. It's, you know, all of us kind of understand these things when we're in the game, you know. And so, yeah. So good luck. Yeah, Abhi.
Said in class how when you were to give advice to a
A woman, you said?
woman,
Uh-huh.
be very different. What does it look like for you? And why?
First, men don't really make good students. Men don't listen well, myself included. Women make great students, and it may have to do something with the opposite sexes. I mean, there are lots of, you know, layers to it. And unfortunately, I don't have the patience to go through all of them. Because of the power dynamics, because of the culture in which we live that produces crummy men, men who have to wait till they get to be like 50 or 60 to gain some maturity, you know. And it doesn't matter what sort of degrees you have. Men are just stupid, period, for a long, long time. Given the fact that depression is on the rise, suicide is on the rise, divorce is on the rise, my approach to women would always be different, which is do not depend on any man, you know. Get done with your school, have a lot of power in life. So just in case you are with someone, just in case your marriage doesn't work out, just in case life doesn't work out, you have something to fall back on, you know. That's, you know, that's the basics. You know, it's like Indians, the women and dowry in the form of gold. You know, men are crummy in India, used to be. Sometimes they die, and the woman has nothing because she has no social status really, and all she has are like few bars of gold, and that will sustain her for the rest of her life. You know, I think because of the sort of culture we've created, women really need to have a lot of power because this is a man's world. Everything you see around you, education is a product of men. Society out there is a product of men. If you want to survive in this culture, you need to, some parts of you as a woman need to be transformed into a man. You know, become as vicious, as dominating as men, because you won't survive otherwise. You know, and there are lots of men out there who are just really interested in just one thing about you. And it takes a long time for a man to become interested in other branches that live inside you. I mean, you have a history, you have passions, you have all these different things. And it takes a long time for a man to be interested It's difficult for men to sacrifice their own passions in order to be interested in another. You know, men, just let them be. They're just like cows. Hopefully around the age 50, 60, 70, they'll figure things out. So, yeah. I'm sure there are always going to be exceptions. The men in this room, amazing. Yes.
What do you think about the fact that women are more successful than men in education currently?
Well, again, that may have to do with how crummy men have become. The women can't find a man, so they put themselves to school. You know, and it may be part of our repressed consciousness in the sense that women have been dominated for such a long time, and for the first time, like after the 1960s, you have a movement that encourages women to go into the social world, become CEOs. I mean, most of the deans in Tower Building, they're all women. Our chancellor is a woman. The president is a woman. You know, so what that does to society is a different story. What that does to relationships is a different story. What that does to women who have children at the same time are CEOs in position of power, that's a different story. So everything is complicated, you know. So, yeah. Carmen, anything? Rosalind? Yeah, and then?
Look at the man's world, but why does it suck to be without women?
It doesn't suck to be without women. One of the things that, I mean, what people realize is that, I mean, right now, all of us in this class, if you happen to be single and you're fine with being single, you're sufficient, okay? Let's say you're minding your own business, your life is going relatively good, and you're walking to Pete's Coffee, and all of a sudden a very young, attractive woman walks past by you. And for some strange reason, you begin to kind of think about her and desire her. For the first time, you realize how insufficient you are as a man. A woman has the power to inspire your poverty, that without this woman, you amount to nothing. So you put everything out the window and you begin to pursue this woman, you know. And the same thing is true when a woman is minding her own business, her life is going relatively well, and she comes across a man, you know, and that man all of a sudden inspires a certain want and need about her. For the first time again, she comes to realize, well, without this particular man, or without this man, you know, her life doesn't mean much, doesn't have much value. So that's one of the things about just living out there in the world. What the physical world does for us in many ways is that it reminds us how poor we are as the sort of pathetic animals that we are, that we need things, you know, that you see two people holding hands and you say, you know, it sucks to be alone, and you are alone. You know, you happen to live in a studio and someone lives in a 5-bedroom, and you say, man, it sucks to be in a studio. You want to live in a 5-bedroom. And then you're inspired to go to school, to make some money, to save that money, to buy yourself a nice place. You know, and the more mindful and aware you become how it sucks to be alone in life, you know, then on Valentine's you'll make some sacrifices and you'll get some flowers. Not because you love your companion, but you hate being alone. You know, so what the world does, it creates poverty, it removes poverty, creates different sorts of poverties, and you know, that's how it is. There was a guy, what's his name? John Butler. Did I talk about this guy? No? Anyways, anyone else? Anna? Carmen? Liam? Jason?
I hear being honest that, like being aware of your own self.
Probably not. You know, Lilac and I have one major thing in common. You know what that is? someone, they were very interested in our chests. So they grabbed a couple of razors, they cut our chest open, played with our hearts a little bit, and the veins surrounding the heart, and they sewed it back together. I'll tell you a story. Do you have a girlfriend? Are you right now on good terms with her? Can you go home and mess things up today? Just like pick a fight. Just really mess things up really badly. What you will experience is that she'll probably scream at you and ask you to leave the house, and you will. And as you're walking around the lake, all you can think about is, how could you be so stupid? She may leave you, you love her, you spend like 5 or 6 years with this woman, you have a rich history with her. And you realize that when there's a serious hiccup in life, most of what you and I are interested in life kind of just disappears. You know, it's like I got accepted to all these UCs, and all of a sudden I get a letter from Stanford telling me they too have accepted me. The UCs diminish. I'm not interested in them anymore. Even though I was excited, I danced, I drank, I smoked. You know, now that I get this letter from Stanford, I'm overjoyed. You know, I don't even think about the UCs anymore. One of the nice things about trauma, whether negative or positive, is that you become like a magnifying glass. You're just focused on one single thing. And when your phone rings and it's your friends and they want to talk to you about whatever, you're not very interested. And all of a sudden you interject and you say, well, let me tell you what happened to me today. You know, being under death is, we are not very serious people. I mean, consider for a moment Anna. I like Anna. You know. So throughout the past few weeks in this class, she becomes interested in whatever, doesn't really matter. Then I get an email saying, yo, that's how the email goes. Yo, maybe I come to your office. You know, begins to speak like Ali G, right? And so comes to my office and sits, and we talk a little bit. And then Anna says, what's that big fat blue book you have? So, oh, it's, you know, you're interested? Oh yeah, I'm so interested. So, okay. So, borrows the book, you know. I asked, Anna, how's the book? You know, I haven't read it for like weeks. Oh, well, why don't you give it back? Are you sure? Yeah, give the fucking book back to me. Yes. And it doesn't mean that Anna is not inspired. It doesn't mean that Anna is not interested. What it does mean is that the inspiration or the excitement or the interest hasn't reached the stage of responsibility or obligation. That Anna doesn't feel, you know, their relationship is not that intimate just yet. So it's easy for Anna to kind of just put the book on the shelf and let it gather dust. Okay. Being under death means basically that most of us are just casual with life. We ask silly questions. If you have one of the 8 steps in Buddhism is that you should just not gossip. But the truth is, most of us in this class will not survive life without gossiping. Thou shalt not gossip is really just reserved for advanced people who are very, very, very serious. Always pay attention to the way you're thinking, to the way you're feeling. Whatever is casual, just pause. Don't talk about it. Don't think about it. Don't feel about it. And don't ask questions out of just mere curiosity. It doesn't serve you. It doesn't serve anyone. Be serious. And you realize to be serious about anything first, something must have happened to you that cracks you open. That thing goes inside you, and in as much as it creates a good amount of pain and you want to drive it out, it refuses to go out because there's a part of you that sees a tremendous amount of value in this particular pain. با درد بساز چون دوای تو منم، با کس منشین که آشنای تو منم. گر کشته شدی مگو که من کشته شدم، شکرانه بده که خونبهای تو منم. I won't give you the translation. And so what you have in Heidegger, for example, and all of us in this class, you have these moments, where you just wake up from the nap and just life smells bad. You smell bad. Everything about what you see, what you feel smells bad. Your history just doesn't do anything for you. And you walk around the lake, you're kind of confused, you're mad, you're sad. You don't really know how you're feeling. All you know is that you just don't fit well in your own skin. You're restless. And you have read somewhere like in the Gospel of Luke, the birds have the trees and the foxes have the earth, but Son of Humanity has no place to rest his head. And all of a sudden that rings is so true for you. You have a home. You have a house, it's not a home. You have a companion, but it's not really a relationship. And you just don't feel connected to anything, And you sit somewhere, and let's say you go to Decaffeinated, a coffee shop owned by a Persian on College and Ashby. It's a beautiful place. You sit there and you begin to open your journal and you write. And all of your writing has this serious tone to it. And it's serious because you're just in a serious place. The problem is you don't have a solid, permanent, intimate relationship with this moment. So it comes, it stays with you for a number of days or weeks or hours, kind of like Anna in this book, and then it disappears. Nothing wrong with that. The point is remembering and keeping moments of seriousness alive so it could become part of who and what you are, the main part of who and what you are. It's very, very, very difficult because life doesn't like people who ask questions. Instructors don't like to be challenged. Politicians don't like to be challenged. Nobody desires to be challenged. You don't want your girlfriend to come to you and say, do you really love me? Because I can't feel it. I can't see it. It's a challenge that you don't really like to be around, you see. And so I think because Heidegger, in many ways, in as much as he was a relatively interesting thinker, he was also unaware of certain things. But all those things aside, I think what was interesting about Heidegger, he found himself in a frustrating mood for a number of years. He's considered to be a forest philosopher. It's much different than living in like the civilized world. In the forest, you're amongst trees, you're amongst wood, you're amongst rivers, you're amongst animals. They bring out a different part of you. And so for Heidegger, the sort of philosophy he was interested in was always asking big questions, And when you begin to ask big questions, small questions go away. You have friends who are 18, 20. What do 20-year-olds ask? Silly questions. If you were to hang around, people my age, 60, 62, all people talk about is time goes by very, very quickly. Be serious. If you were to call me and say, well, I can't come to you, Amir, today because I'm hanging out with my friends, I say, well, you're not very serious. I don't want to hang out with you anyways, And so you realize that the people you hang out with, if they happen to be older, if they happen to be serious, they impose on you focus, interest, passion, all those things. And the nice thing about that is that you no longer have the right to feel the feelings of 20-year-olds. You have to think big. It's kind of like when you live in a war-torn environment, like Palestine, like if you live in certain parts of the world that suffers from immense poverty, you can't ask your mom to go to Target and buy toys. They'll slap you, So at the age of 2, you begin to learn how to cook, how to clean, how to be like a useful member of your community. It's not like here or anywhere that's privileged. So eventually, of course, Heidegger suffered from what most of us in this class suffer from, which is you forget. You forget because life gets in, because your own passions come in and interrupt the flow. Your past comes in, your fears come in. There are lots of things that derail you from being focused, being unto death. There was a scene in the movie Enter the Dragon Brad Pitt and Bruce Lee played in it. Not Brad Pitt, just Bruce Lee. And so there is this scene where they have to fight. So Bruce Lee, being Asian, has to fight this white guy who's American. And so to show how powerful he is, this white guy picks up this board that he just got from Home Depot, punches it, and the board breaks into 1,000 pieces. And Bruce Lee looks at him and says, "Boards don't hit back," And the white guy doesn't really know what the hell that means. But nevertheless, they get into a fight and he gets his ass whooped. Books can be really, really good, but books don't hit back. Companions can be really, really good, but companions rarely challenge you because they know that the relationship will be destroyed. The only person I think who's able to challenge you and challenge you the right way to make sure that you don't suffer from too many hours of forgetfulness is someone like Morpheus, who drags Neo away from the Matrix, a place where you just fall into things and become unconscious in many ways and unaware and mindless. And he's housed in Nebuchadnezzar. And Nebuchadnezzar has a certain energy to it. Morpheus is there to make sure that, yes, you do have a dream, and I want to make sure these dreams come into reality. It's not enough for you to say, I want to do philosophy. Well, you have to make some sacrifices. And if you hang out with Anna and Skylar, you're going to just go back to being who you've always been. If on the other hand, you hang out with Carmen, for example, you'll be done with your PhD in like 2 minutes. Right, Carmen? So, anyways, let's move on. Yeah.
Are you familiar with Youth at Front?
Is the book?
Writings by Plato.
Is it about death? It's something, yeah. Why?
I was curious about your thoughts on it.
I mean, I don't know like the book by heart. Yeah. I just like the name Plato. I haven't read much of his writing because he just writes too much. Just give me everything in like a tiny little paragraph. No, I haven't. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Do you think the gap between descriptions and moral prescriptions can be bridged?
I don't really know what morality is. All I know is that in regards to morality, that when we first came to America, we had no money. And I slept on bus benches for a while, at the same time working at Church's Fried Chicken in Sacramento. The only moral thing I could do was to steal money and to steal chicken. If Moses was to come down and say, thou shalt not steal, I'd probably like take what Moses had in his pocket as well. I don't like someone like Immanuel Kant, because I think people's circumstances changes all the time. Some people have a tremendous amount of poverty that they are forced to do certain things. Some people in a position of privilege don't. So that's number one. I don't know what morality is. If you're to be a Catholic, if I was your companion and I got pregnant, you're not ready for fatherhood. I'm not really ready for motherhood. You're uneducated, so am I. You have no money. I don't either. You got no parents. I got some, but they're no good. I'm not going to put myself at risk. I'm not going to put this kid at risk. I'm just going to terminate the pregnancy. I don't care what God says. So you have to overcome a lot of fears and a lot of religious structure that lives inside your head. And you have to understand your position really, really well. And you have to understand what it means to be autonomous, and then you make the appropriate decision. It's kind of like what we talked about a couple of days ago in regards to listen to what the cosmos is telling you. You know, the truth is, you look at your environment and you say, "This is no way I'm going to have a child." You know, and I can't raise a kid by myself, and I'm only 13 or 14 or 15. I forget the rest of your questions. You know, it's something I always tell my students. You're not going to understand any of this stuff until you're 50 or 60 or 70. That's if you remember anything about, what we talk about in this class. What you need to do is make sure you pass this class and other classes. I don't care if you want to do AI to do your essays. I don't care how you write your essays. Just don't get caught, do them, get a C or better, and go your way. I don't care about the moral reasons behind it. None of those things really matter. Sometimes I get these ridiculous emails from instructors, like at DVC, or a few times from San Francisco State, saying that, yeah, this person wrote this essay, it was, filtered through Turnitin, and it says 100% plagiarized. Is it true? Was this person in your class? I just delete the email. What the fuck do you care? Give them a C or a B or an A, pass this ridiculous person, let them go and live their life. Don't be a dick. But instructors think very highly of themselves, which is really stupid. Yes, Anna. Good job. Anyone else?
I guess to expand on my earlier question.
Yes.
David Hume, a famous philosopher, kind of argues that there are rational truths and that there are empirical truths, that moral laws can't be either. So it's like trying to figure out.
May I be honest? I can respect a man who's not married, and who doesn't have a wife, children, and doesn't feel the obligation of just basic, everyday, simple things of life. David Hume is like a Jesus Christ. Be compassionate towards everyone. Why do you favor your kids, but not other kids as much? You should treat everyone equal. That's great. If you don't have to answer to anyone. He's a nice guy. He has nice things to say. His book is great. He just has no life. That doesn't mean that he didn't suffer any pain, struggle, but he just didn't have a life. Anyone else? Yes, sorry.
You like Schopenhauer?
No, not really. Look, everybody has wonderful things to say about a lot of things, I'm just not in the mood for David Hume and Schopenhauer today. There is on Audible, for those of you who have that particular application on your phone and you pay $14 a month for it, you can get the entire Schopenhauer collection. It's about like 50 hours. It's a waste of your time. There are much better things to listen to than Schopenhauer, but yeah, he has some nice things to say. And there is nothing wrong with like picking up books, David Hume, Immanuel Kant, Schopenhauer. I'm sure a paragraph or two or three or four will jump out and they'll capture your interest, and that's great. Yeah. And yeah.
There's a way to on the fact that how does one go about, you know, realizing
One of the difficulties with the problem of death is that it makes everything irrelevant. And if you have ambitions, if you have desires, if there are places you want to go and there are things you want to do, the problem is that death makes them without value. And then you get depressed. If you're able to survive, that long, long period, there is a great book. We don't really know who the author is. It's called The Cloud of Unknowing. It was written by a Christian mystic that always had this cloud of unknowing above your head, that just in case you ever come to realize that, or believe, or assume that you know something, know that this cloud is above you. And at any time it could avalanche a good amount of life on your head, where you realize you're just a maggot, you don't understand anything. It's kind of like what God tells Job, you're just stupid. You're just a worm, you don't understand anything. So that's number one, that death makes everything irrelevant. The problem with that is life is a serious business, that you can't really take everything or make everything irrelevant, because you have a body, that body needs security. Add to it, you may have a family, that family needs protection, and they need you. And so you realize you have 1 foot in and 1 foot out. And eventually your kids are going to see that. Your husband or your wife are going to see that. And that's no way to live life. There's a good amount of friction. Okay? You want to, and by the time you have this opening where you've grown to be somewhat intimate with the prospect of death, you've been contaminated. It's kind of like this butterfly, and you just bend over and you grab the butterfly by the wings, and once the butterfly is infected by human fingers, the oil that lives, it can no longer fly. Once death touches you, once anything serious touches you, it's really difficult going back and living a casual life. It just doesn't work. Unless time happens and then you forget, or at least the experience dims a little bit, and then you can go back to life. When death makes everything irrelevant, it's like a bucket that no longer has anything in it. Then you got to figure out, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? How you want to inject meaning into life? And death kind of comes in and says, there is nothing. It's sometimes when I come to class and I look at people and say, well, I have to be here for an hour and 15 minutes. Words, what are they really? I mean, he's going to take him one way, she's going to take him another, you're going to take him another. It's just all interpretation. And no one's really going to get what I'm saying. Not that people need to. And in the end, words become ideas. Ideas go into life. Eventually they disappear. Why talk about anything at all? And that particular kind of awareness makes many things under the sun irrelevant. Now, again, if you're able to survive those things, there comes a point where you say, since my life is short, it's going to expire at any time, maybe I should just suck the marrow out of every moment that comes my way. And you'll try to participate and be engaged as much as you possibly can. It's kind of like the wonderful story of Soren Kierkegaard, where he's the son of every party. He makes people laugh, he makes them cry. But when he goes home, he walks home alone. And he remembers who he is when other people aren't there anymore, when they no longer have the power to distract them. He remembers that he's an individual, he's all alone, no one can understand him. He has a very, very, very solitary interior. I mean, that's a very, very tough place. The friend we used to play music with, He's about 80, stage 1 prostate cancer. He's relatively okay, but 2 weeks ago he found out that his son has brain tumor. They're giving him 3 to 6 months. I called him after a year, what do you tell him? Nothing. Our conversation lasted for maybe a minute. What do you say to someone who's in so much pain? I mean, it's one thing for kids to lose their parents, but for the parents to just watch your kids slowly disappear, that's tough. I don't have the language. And I don't want to comfort him with ridiculous philosophy that I've read in some books. So, out of respect, I just say a couple of things. I'm sorry, if there is anything you need, our family is here. We've always been around, so just don't shy away. Thank you, and that's it. So, yeah, it's best not to be serious. It's good for you. It's good for people around you. Yeah. Lilac?
Do you think there's value in gratitude?
The problem with gratitude is it happens only through loss. Right now you're healthy. Today you go home and you have this migraine headache and you want to do 1,001 things, but they're just not leaving you alone. And you go to bed and you put the covers over your head. You just feel crappy. And you say, man, I felt good just a few minutes ago. What the hell is happening to me? And you begin to realize how wonderful it is to be healthy. You hang out with your parents, but as David Hume would say, we all suffer from the problem of induction. You've seen them every day for the past 60 years. You're going to say to yourself, oh, I'll see them again tomorrow. Why call them today? I'll go next week. And then that night comes about and you have a message, Dad died. And then you begin to punish yourself. You were planning to go to Roseville. Why didn't you go to Roseville? And then you say, man, I should have. And then you say, I should have spent more time with my dad. I should have, enjoyed my time with Dad. And that's another tragedy that all of us suffer from, which is it's really, really, really tough to be mindful and to be aware of all the gifts that we have in life. Whether it's you have a job that pays the rent, you have parents who have done their best to take care of you, protect you, give you things. Your health, time, youth, energy, vitality. I mean, these are just gifts you're not really aware of. And when you lose them, then you say, yeah. If by that you mean, can I be thankful just being aware? Yeah, you can. It's just the awareness itself is difficult. Just to be all the time mindful and aware, that's you have to be profoundly advanced in life. If I have been diagnosed with cancer stage 4, it's very difficult to forget the fact that I'm sick. It's going to be very difficult to forget that I'm going to die because pain is always around me, always with me, always in me. It's never going to leave. Okay. If gratitude becomes one of pain, in other words, you know that you're going to forget. As a human being, you have no choice but to forget things. And you have to wrestle with forgetfulness. And you have to pin it. You must always win. So you could be aware. So you could always be thankful. The problem with thankfulness is that You can never whine. You can never complain about anything. Because it is true that you've lost maybe 5 or 6 things, but you also have 50 things that benefit you in life. You know, and most of the things that give us meaning in life, you know, you consider yourself to be a sinner. You consider we all go to therapy, you know, for a variety of different reasons. Well, why do you go there? You have your health, you have your legs, you know, go hiking, hang out with your friends. You have money, engage in a good conversation over a cup of coffee. There are lots of things out there to be thankful for. The other aspect is, if you study human emotions for the past few millions of years, to this particular point, about 90% of the emotions that live inside us is negative. And there's a reason. It tells us that life is frustrating. Life is difficult. You know, and you're always occupied with overcoming difficulties of life. Because it is difficult. It's difficult to be thankful when you're always wrestling, not to be dominated, not to be pinned by the forces of life. You know, how could you stay in this class, be completely bored out of your mind, and say, I am thankful that I'm alive? It doesn't work. The only thing you're thankful for is, thank God there's a clock, and thank God, you know, the hands are moving really, really fast. I know there are lots of books out there that inspire us, advertise to us that we should be thankful, we should live in the moment, exercise compassion. I think just the American culture and the American psyche has this knack for quick fixes, you know. Add to it, you know, technology is there to kind of assist us with that as well. When, you know, TikTok is no more than 30 seconds and you become addicted to that, right? You know, we fall victim to these bumper stickers. You know, be thankful, be grateful, be this, be that. It doesn't work. If you look at all the teachers we've ever had, beginning with Buddha, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, they fought. I mean, why do you fight with people? Why do you try to change them? Just be thankful for who and what they are. No, it doesn't work that way. Because there are certain things that you need to get rid of in life. They're just bad. You can't be thankful for their existence and their presence and their dominance. You know, you should be thankful for the fact that you have power to get rid of them. That may be good. Carmen, anything? Yeah.
What's your favorite food? Yeah, have a final meal.
Like on my deathbed?
Not really like your deathbed, but
Oh, like
you'll enjoy
the
it.
Green Mile.
Yeah.
The Green Mile, right. Yeah, what do you want to have? Do I have teeth?
You got everything.
I can eat?
And
I'm dying, right?
not necessarily, maybe like you should share something like
Oh, yes, that sounds good. Is the foam that's going to be put on my head, is going to be dry or wet? If it's dry, it'll be a painful death. If it's wet, oh, there you go. Good job. So the last time I saw Hussein when I was on his deathbed, and I went there with the entire family. My nephew Arman had just come back from Saudi Arabia. He went on this pilgrimage, and not so much to circle the Kaaba, but to ride a few camels, you know. And so Hussein looks at him and says, so how was it? You know, that house was built by Abraham and Isaac, or Ishmael. So it was good. And then he looks at my mom and says, I should have written a book about Hajj, pilgrimage. He spent a lot of time fixing his house. He spent a lot of time writing ridiculous things and collecting information for his newspaper, going to ridiculous gatherings. He was a social activist of sorts. But in the end, he had a lot of regrets. You know. But to go back to your question, I would probably have chole kebab. Kubide. It's some cow being slaughtered. Well, kebab. It's like a long penis. And then rice. And since I'm going to die, I can put some butter. And I can, you know, eat a lot of fatty food. Yeah. No, but I think you should contemplate dying in your sleep. Best way to go. Anyone else before we... Today's Tuesday, right? So for those of you coming late, Thursday will be our last day. We won't meet next week. I'll be in the office. Tuesday from 8 to 10, that's when we're supposed to like have a final. If you want to come by, email me first. Don't just come to the office. Just email me first. And just in case you desire to email, don't email. But if you do, that's fine. Any other questions or comments before we go home? Rosalind, you sure? Is it time? What time is it? For what? Okay, we have a minute. Jason? Alexis?
If you have a certain history, like if you can angry or things happen.
Can you say this again?
So,
If you can maybe give me an example. Okay.
say there's someone who had a class or
Okay.
their life is lacking anything peaceful or especially joyful, they experience a lot of anger or grief that arises because they find out how to live with that. Remember, for example, two of your clients, everything is good, they're different, but you because you're not used to like you.
I don't know. Sorry. You should read Sigmund Freud, Civilization is Discontent, if you haven't already. Or the concept of death wish. There was a movie on it too, by Bruce Willis played in it. It's really good. That's it? Sorry. Carmen, congratulations. Okay. Take good care. I'll see you Thursday.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.